So thank you so much for coming. For those of you that haven't come to a Dex event before or don't really know much about Dex, Dex exists to connect awesome engineers to the companies that deserve them. And when we think about awesome and exceptional companies, one company that kept coming up again and again and again, and my team will be very embarrassed that I say this, but because they're all fan boys and girls of Linear, was Linear. So we sent an email to the team, and Thomas very, very kindly agreed to come and speak to us today. If you don't know Thomas, he is the co-founder and CTO of Linear. He spent a bunch of time doing things at other very, very cool startups, including Uber, as well as building Linear into the company that is today. Linear is used by around, the latest number I've seen is 25,000 companies.
Yeah, that's about right.
Just 25,000, including companies like OpenAI, Cursor, Ramp, and a bunch of other really cool companies in a category that you would think lots of people would hate, but a company and product that people really love. So today, find out a bit more about Thomas, his origin story, Linear's origin story, how they think about AI, what the future of all of our jobs are going to be in 2 or 3 years' time, how we're going to interact with Linear, as well as some of their expansion plans into Europe as well. To kick it off, maybe would love for you to tell the audience how you found yourself from Finland to Uber to Linear, and tell the story however you like to tell it.
All right, this might be a very long story, but I tried to keep it short. I started back in '96 in Finland doing, I went to study for a week, information technology, and then I got a job, and that was it. I realized that working at a company that does IT just gave me better insight into what engineering and programming actually is. Back in the day, like at the university, like they taught you Pascal. And it was the big turnoff for me. I was like, I'm never going to use Pascal. Like, why are you teaching me this? So I'm one of those guys who went to study at a time when you actually could get more out of it by just working your way through it and learning yourselves. So I worked on CD-ROM multimedia presentations back in the day. If you ever had a Nokia phone, if you remember what Nokia is, cool. There's at least one person as old as me.
Exactly, that's fine.
It usually came with a CD-ROM with instructions on how to use that phone. And chances are that was made by me, or at least the company that I was working for. The internet came around, and that obviously was much more interesting. So I started my own agency together with a few friends, ran that for 9 years. In hindsight, that was sort of the time of my life that I sort of regret the most. At that point, I didn't realize that you can just build things and that you can sort of work on your own products. So after 9 years, I was like, this is not what I want to do. I don't want to spend 3 months on a project and then throw it over the fence and move to the next thing. I want to sink my teeth into something. So I wheeled myself out of that company, did a few startups in Finland, moved to China for a year, doing sort of games and animations and toys for the local market there, again at a startup. And then got the opportunity to go to San Francisco. A friend of mine sold his company to Groupon, and he needed more engineers to bump up his sale price. So he reached out to me, and I was like, yeah, sure. Like I can just do this. I can go to the US. I never had the idea that it would be a possibility. I landed in San Francisco, worked on Groupon for 2 years on sort of a register application on an iPad for high-end restaurants. So you could, sort of take orders, swipe credit cards, send those orders to the kitchen. And it was a nice product, but like Groupon really wasn't the engineering powerhouse that I wanted to get experience from while I was over in San Francisco. So when I got my green card and was able to freely select where I actually wanted to work at, then I switched over to Uber and spent 5 years on the mobile platform team over there. Scaling Uber, seeing a fair share of hypergrowth. When I joined, we were 15 mobile engineers, and when I left, we were 400. And the company grew from like 1,000 people to today, I think it's 45,000. So I went through that, and I knew immediately that I never want to do this again. Like, I don't want to hypergrow companies because it comes with so much sort of, excuse my language, bullshit. and sort of corporate, process building and peer reviews and all that stuff that I really didn't care about. Like, I cared about building products, and that's all I wanted to do. And in the last years of Uber, we started chatting with Jory and then Kari, my other co-founders, about working on something together, and ended up starting Linear.
And how did you meet your other co-founders?
So Jory was in Finland when I was there. So we met in Finland, 15 years ago, and he had a company with Kari in San Francisco that they then sold to Coinbase. So that's how they got to know each other, and that's how I got to know Kari as well. So the Finnish community in San Francisco and everywhere in the world is pretty small. You sort of know everybody who's around, and we just hang out a lot, and that's how we got to talk about issue tracking and project management for all the reasons. I don't know how this became sort of the thing that we chatted about like every single week, but how we got to starting Linear was the realization that like there's not the realization that there's an opportunity, but the realization that like we could actually change the industry in some way. And this is a bit of a longer story, but like I tell it to all of our employees that join. Linear is not about, as a company, it's not about just the tool itself. Like, our origins came from hearing other companies and hearing other engineers talk about how they hated Jira. And you will not hear us, say a bad word about Atlassian, because like we do respect the company. They've been building awesome software for like 30 years. But if you talk to engineers, that's what we heard like 80-90% of the time. Like, I hate Jira. I was like, it's a tool that you have to use every day. Like, it's quite crazy that you have this strong feeling towards software. And we sort of realized the opportunity immediately. Like, how hard can it be to build a project management, or if you start small, an issue tracker, that would be better. And we were immediately like, we probably could build it in half a year or so. Something that is fast and beautiful and has a good UX, and all of this stuff. And then we left it at that. Like, we didn't want to jump on it because we sort of realized that project management is kind of boring. I don't want to spend the next 10 years on project management. And what got to it is we kept on talking about this, and we sort of questions like why nobody has taken this opportunity and started something in this space, because it was so obvious that there was a great market to be had. And we sort of realized that anybody who sort of is interested in design and great UX and all of the stuff that I think Linear represents today doesn't want to be in that space. They want to build consumer services and consumer applications. And we were sort of the same. And at some point it clicked to us. We were like, it's really not about building the tool or being in the space, but like what we really want to be as a company, or if we ever were to build a company, is somebody that can help other people build better software, higher quality software. And that became a mission that actually was super interesting. Like, we are heavy consumers of software. We love using great software. And if we, through our work, can change the industry in some way, then we get to use better software.
Yeah, I was thinking about that because you all have consumer backgrounds, whether it's Uber, Coinbase, and then Airbnb as well. And I wondered if the reason that you were able to create a tool that people love in a category that they hate is that focus on, like, the end of the day, the consumer that's using it.
Yes, I think so. And we had just the right combination, amongst us as three founders. Like, you had a Finnish designer who's like always very, functional and to the point, and no sort of, just white and black, and that's it. Then you had Jory, who was like excellent at figuring out what users need and users want, and how to build product on that. And then I had a bit of technical competence, doing synchronization, just a little bit, doing synchronization engines and trying building effectively the underpinnings of the application that made it fast. So the combination of us three, like, we were able to build something great. And I had my sort of, past in games as well. And I had done some campaigns and Flash and all that rich media stuff. So I had a good eye for design as well, and enjoyed well-designed applications.
And that synchronization engine actually kind of became a bit of an edge of Linear itself. How did you think about that when you were building it and designing the company versus now, today, it being part of the infrastructure?
I think we realized immediately that it was sort of going to be the cornerstone of the company. And we did something that I don't think any startup should do, which was like focus half a year on just the technology without building anything else. But we were still at our jobs, and we sort of did it on the side. And I was keen on trying out, web technologies after a, long stint in mobile. And I got just interested in figuring out. I had built synchronization engines before, like 3 of them at all the previous companies. So I wanted to sort of see what I could do on the web, and immediately struck me that it would work very nicely, and it would be super fast. You would have no page loads, and to us, like, we sort of realized that that's one of the big aspects of a great application, something that feels like a desktop application, where like it's no longer web, but it feels like you're just running a native local application. So yeah, we spend a lot of time up front building out the technology, something that many startups don't have the ability to do. Or if you're building something in a space that you don't know if it will stick, you probably shouldn't. Like we realized that the way for us to win in the space that was, where there were hundreds of incumbents and hundreds of different applications for project management, the way for us to win was to build something much better. So we were in competition immediately from the get-go. And that's why we had to sort of, build something great in the space. If you're building, Uber the first time or Airbnb, you don't know if people will come into your car if you just, drive up to them or stay at your home. Like, you don't know if the idea will work. And then you probably shouldn't, build out the tech first.
Time, yeah. Interesting. And a little known fact that I didn't know before I started researching the company is that the team has spent a very little amount on paid marketing and trying to convincing people to use Linear. How was that in the early days? How did you get the tool out there? And what did it feel like to see people use and enjoy using it so much to the extent that it kind of became a product-led motion?
Yeah, so our approach to entering the market was to start small. Like we were 3 people in the beginning, and we had to build something that was competitive. So what you do is you scope down. You're like, what is the sort of minimum feature set that you need to build? And what we did is we just targeted very small companies in the beginning. We were like, if you started about 5 people, what do you need? Mm-hmm. Well, you don't need project management. You need issue tracking. You need to have a place where you can effectively put your things that you want to do, and then you want to track them somehow. And that's what we built. And we talked with customers all the time. Had a big wait list of people that came in, and we invited smaller companies first. And once they were happy and they had no sort of suggestions anymore or no complaints about the product, then we started increasing the size. So we just went upstream and getting larger and larger customers, and that we probably got to growth companies without doing any marketing, with just the word of mouth. Like, we built such a great tool that people loved instead of hated. And that sort of got us our first customers and made us profitable, and all that before we really spent anything on marketing. That's no longer really true. Like, we do spend now on marketing because most of the startups know us. So it's about like reaching everybody who hasn't heard about us yet.
Fantastic. And another thing I read is that one of the principles or priorities that you have within the company is like not focusing on side quests. And kind of doing one thing at a time or focusing on one thing. How does that manifest at Linear? Where did that come from?
It's always it's a struggle. Like, people want to do side quests.
Yeah.
You get excited about something and then you want to try it out and see it in the product. I think like this whole thing came from Jory, who was like, let's focus on what is important. Let's like not spend our time doing anything else. That is might be important, but not as important as the things that we're building. It's just about like prioritization and having focus on the next feature sets that we want to build. In the beginning, it was all about side quests. Like, when we started, we were building a tool for effectively us. And we were the primary and target audience, engineers and designers. So we just like went in and was like, what do I want in the product? And then I just built it. And we were shipping like, I don't know, 5 features every week, every single one of us. And at some point we reached a level where like, I don't know anymore what I would build here. Like I'm like everything that I need from the product is sort of there, from an engineering perspective, because we were still a small company, so we didn't need the project management ourselves. And that's when we started sort of, hiring our first PM, so that they could focus on the larger roadmap and figure out like what do these larger companies actually need, talk with them, and sort of get a sense of the direction. And maybe that's when we started thinking about like side quests are just sort of a waste of, like, not a waste of time, but like they will not get us to where we want to be as quickly as possible. Like we need focus. We need to be able to say no to many things. And maybe in the age of AI, that is, super, super important, where like you can just build anything within in an hour, but you probably shouldn't. Like even if you can, like it might be a bad idea to put a feature in. So we've always been about focus and always been aware of this, of the trap that I think Atlassian went into, which was catering to all the needs of all the enterprise customers, and then ending up in a place where like you had a product that had so many features that nobody really wanted to use, and then the product became complicated, and we didn't want to end up there.
Again, you kind of alluded to it before, but I guess now that you can ship practically more than you maybe should, or at least could do a year ago or however long ago, talk to me about taste, your views on taste and AI, and why it's important to kind of maybe do less versus more.
How do I put this? I think the fact that you didn't have AI was helpful in some way. Like you had to think about what you wanted to accomplish, because engineering a feature, it took time, and you needed to put effort into it. So you were thinking about what you wanted to build before you actually committed to building it. So you did some designs, you did user research, you did all of these things. And maybe nowadays, people sort of seem to have the tendency of like, oh, let's just try it out. Like, let's just put a prototype in there. Let's convolute the code base. Let's ship it maybe with a feature flag, but it still is in the code base, and other AI agents will pick up on those changes that you've made, and it just becomes, super complicated. And I don't think the end result is any better. And I think we're in a state where like this is all new to us, like agents shipping features, very, very quickly and one-shotting, most of the stuff nowadays. That it might be that the pendulum has swung, too far into the opposite direction, and we might have a sort of reckoning half a year from now where we realize that, oh, this was all bad. Like we shouldn't actually build this way. We should go back to sort of designing well thought out, features, and design them and put some thought into it, and look at, not prototypes, but designs and layouts and all of this thing, and just do the work up front before we actually start, implementing the functionality. And I don't know if that will happen, but like that is my belief, that like we are in a place where we just build too much.
And how do you take that philosophy at Linear itself?
We still work on projects, and we have pretty small project teams. Like usually a feature is built by maybe 2 or 3 people, a designer and then an engineer or 2, and maybe a product manager if it's a complicated functionality. And we haven't strayed from that. And that coupled with sort of the fact that we don't do side quests focuses us on the functionality. And we are able to ship faster because of AI, but it's not that it has changed the process at which we ship functionality or how we work on new functionality.
And practical advice for members of the audience who will inevitably be using AI tools and be at companies who may be shipping more things. How would you take some of those principles and apply it more practically in people's day-to-day?
I don't think AI changes anything. Like we strongly believe, and the whole of Linear was founded on this idea that we want to see quality software, and we want to help companies build better software. And one of the sort of ideas behind Linear with the tool was like, if we can build a project management tool that is beautiful and that you like using and that has a good user experience, you as a user have no excuse to build anything less good. So you should hopefully be inspired by the tool. And I hope that other people sort of share this aspect on quality. And maybe the horrible thing that happens, and I saw this at Uber as well, at large companies, you see this thing where you look at your revenue effectively. Like Uber had metrics, the sort of big 5 metrics that we're looking at, one of which was revenue. And that was the one thing that product managers would focus on. If you ship something, your revenue goes up, it's good. If it goes down, it's bad. That's how features were built. Like you would think of a thesis of like how can we make revenue go up, and then we implement it, and then we see revenue go up or stay the same at which we the time we kill the feature. But nobody was looking at quality. And if you look at the Uber application today, it's quite horrible. Like it's not a good user experience, and I feel sad personally because
you haven't been there to
yeah,
I haven't been for the last.
I haven't been there.
Years.
We used to care. Like we had a small team where we were like, I still remember the first PR that I put up. And back in the day, Uber had this this pole in the middle of the screen that would tell you how the ETA of the car at that location. And I made some changes to the margins of the map, and I was like, oh, this looks good. And then one of the OGs sent the PR back to me saying like, oh, it's 2 pixels too high. Like I measured the pixels up and down, and you need to put it down a pixel. And I was like, oh man, this is great. Like I love it that people care so much about the product that they measure these things and see these things. And I took a tangent on this, but like what happens at big companies is if everything's tied to revenue, and quality doesn't really, improve revenue that much. Like you can try out, all kinds of things. You can implement a feature very quickly, and your revenue will go up, and you'll be happy. But in the long run, I strongly believe that if you keep on doing that, you just degrade the quality over time, and then you open up yourself to sort of competition, and that somebody can swoop in who has effectively the same product. Like, how hard can it be? Well, it's super hard. To get cars driving around the city, but if you have a better application, then people will start switching over to that if the base product is the same. And that's not captured in any metric. And that's sort of my fear for the future of software, where like agents can implement anything, and we'll just see software getting worse and worse. And hopefully like we get some good examples of like. I think Linear is one example of those where like you've got a market where all the software is not super great, at least according to all the users. And if you then can build something that is like 5 or 10 times better or faster or more beautiful, people will move over, and hopefully that happens in other industries as well.
And how do you keep a track of quality and quality of the software that you're creating when the metrics are so hard to come by?
Yeah, we don't look at a single metric. We have 0 metrics at Linear.
No metrics?
No metrics at all.
Okay.
Because metrics are bad. Like we strongly believe that metrics would for our product would be horrible to look at. To give you an example, like one of the metrics would be like how much time do people use our product for every day? Well, is it good if it goes up or down? Like you could argue both ways. And there is no metric that we can look at. We can talk to our customers and see how happy they are, and maybe that then becomes a metric. But the way we do it is like we hire the right people. Like we really put effort into making sure that we hire people who can build and want to build a product that is as good as Linear is today, and help us make it better. The other thing that we do is like we've got this. I don't want to call it process, because process sounds so enterprisey. But we've got this thing called Quality Wednesdays. We at some point, like 2.5 years ago, and we can go into how this started. But what we do is like we have everybody pick something in the product that is a bit off. Not necessarily a bug, because we have a 0 bug policy, so those get fixed immediately. But something where you've got a margin, a pixel off, or something looks not great, or there's a highlight that's missing or not fading correctly. Not a defect per se, but something that is not of the highest quality. So we have every engineer needs to find one in the product every week and fix it. and then everybody presents their findings and shows, what they found and how they fixed it. Well, how is usually pretty simple, but shows, what was wrong in the application. And what we found that did is, because you have this constant mindset of like, oh, I need to think about quality, I need to find my next thing, people start looking for those things while they work, because you have to find something yourself. Like there's no issue list to go back to. And that changes how your mind works. Like you're in this constant, mode of searching for defects, and that will affect how you work in the product as well. Hopefully you won't be making those mistakes in the first place, but you will be looking at like making things not perfect, but very good.
I'm curious. I want to hear the story of how it started.
Oh, it started off with so coming from sort of this rich media background, I was a stickler for highlights and fades and animations. So I wanted the product to be so that everything that is interactive obviously highlights. And the highlight needs to be instantaneous when you hover over it, because otherwise it feels slow. If you see a product where highlight something and it fades in, even if it's like 50 milliseconds or 100 milliseconds, like there seems to be some sort of lag. So it needs to be instant, but when you hover out, it needs to fade out very quickly. I think we have 125 milliseconds. So you barely see it, but there's this slight touch that makes you feel like something's smooth in this application. Like it's hard to say. Like you have to like, if you use the linear application, like go check out the highlights there, and it just feels better that way. But it's super hard to see. Like if you don't know what you're looking for, people would just forget to do that fade out for every single highlight. And at some point, I got just like annoyed by me having to report all these issues and open bugs for everybody to fix. So I did this in an offsite in Tenerife with the European team. I want to do this exercise. Like I want to show them like how they can detect these things. And I took one portion of the application and was like, let's just pile on this and this small window that we have, and let's just like try to figure out what's wrong with it. And in my mind, I was like, oh, I'm looking for those highlights. The highlights were wrong. And what the team came back with was, I think we found like 50 things that were wrong with that small dialogue. And I was like, wow, I didn't see those. And the idea came from that. Like if you just have multiple people pile up on something and just focus on quality issues, you'll find a ton. You'll find much more than you could find yourselves ever. So that's how we started the quality Wednesdays, so that like we could fix all these issues that were in the product. And as a side effect, we got this, awesome thing where people were then constantly thinking about quality.
I love that. Switching gears a bit, I think it was 2 weeks ago, I was scrolling on X and I see a pop-up from the Linear X account saying that issue tracking is dead. And I was a bit confused because I was like, oh, so what does Linear do now? And what does that mean for Linear?
Yeah, most people didn't just read the headline.
Yeah.
didn't read the next paragraph, which says that like the way we've been working with issues before is dead. It's not that issue tracking itself is dead. Like we're not pivoting. It's just a continuation of what we do with a fresh new focus. So what it says is like the handoff. Like issues used to be like this. Effectively this ask, like I as a product manager want this to be done, I hand it off to an engineer, and then the engineer starts working on that, and then I see when it gets completed. And that whole process, like with AI, will just change, where a PM doesn't need to wait for engineering. They just can have an agent ship it for them. So that was what the whole blog post was about. But more deeply, like what we want to make Linear into is sort of a central place where agents are, natively welcome, or like where you as a human being can work with agents. And there's effectively two sides to this. The first side is ingestion. Like we want Linear to be the sort of central place for all the context for agents to work on effectively. If you start a new agent session, you start with a blank slate. Like it just woke up, it doesn't know anything, and then it gets prompted with build this feature. And it's like, what feature? I mean, it needs to go into the code base, and maybe from the code base it can gather some information. But we have all that information in Linear. Like we've got all the product specs, we have all the history, we know what we've been building, we know what's next, we know the initiatives. We are great, and we have the customer reports. Like we know what customers want. So we can compile that into a very excellent context for any single task for an agent. So what we want to do is expand on that context, get even more data in, not just like bug reports and customer reports, but maybe your meeting notes, maybe have a transcript of every single meeting that you do, or every single Slack thread that you have in your company. Process that in a way that we can then feed into your agentic workforce. And then the other side is orchestration. Like if you are working with multiple agents, like at least today, it still needs a bit of hand-holding. You need to figure out like what the agents produced. You need to make sure that it was the correct thing. You need to make sure that it works nicely and is beautiful, because agents can't create beautiful things yet. Maybe they will in the future. And you will have multiple agents running at the same time. So we want for all of that to happen in Linear, where sort of you start with the project, you start with your thoughts, you enter the designs, you have your agents work on your product, and that's what we're now building.
Fantastic. And switching gears again, another thing that I only realized about Linear once I started speaking to you guys is that you are a remote first company. So what does that look like? How many of you are there? Where are you all kind of based? How do you sync up and work together?
Yeah, we are 140 as of today, I think, and we're all over the place. We're in Europe and the US. So we restrict ourselves to these time zones so that at least there's a slight overlap in time zones. We don't have anybody in Asia yet. I'm sure at some point we will sort of need to have support, for example, over there. But we try to sort of build two product teams, one in Europe and one in the US, because who wants to wake up early or stay up late? Not us, at least. So we want to be able to build products and features within the same time zones. And how we do it is by hiring people and giving them sort of agency over building things. We do project-based work. We figure out the roadmap, what we want to achieve. What we usually do is like we have a meetup every year with the whole company. We fly everybody somewhere and then chat for a few days about like what we want to build, what we want to do, what is next, for Linear. And then we all fly back home and execute on that idea. And project teams get formed whenever a project starts and get disbanded when it ends, and then you move on to the next thing. And most of this is possible because like we from the get-go had this idea of, well, it actually started out with not an idea of hiring just senior people. Like we initially hired only senior people because we thought that it would be a disservice to juniors to hire them into a remote company. Like we didn't know how to mentor people in a remote environment. Like we had all done it in the office, but initially we were like, all in different countries or at least different cities. And we just didn't know what it would mean, to hire, people straight out of school, and would be able to teach them, would they be able to learn? So we just said like, let's just hire folks who've seen everything and don't need any hand-holding, who've been at big companies and small companies, so done a startup and done a big company, so they have all the experience, know all the quirks. And that's how we started with that. And then, a year later, we realized that this is pretty awesome. Like you literally don't need to hold anybody's hand. You don't need to tell them anything, especially in the beginning. Like we hired people that like would be able to execute similarly to us. Like, what do you want to build into the product? And we still ask the question today. Like whenever somebody goes through an interview loop, like one of the questions is like, well, what would you build in Linear if you could start tomorrow? Like what is the feature that you would build? And you have to have an answer for that, because otherwise, like, why would you come over?
Well, you've heard it here first, if any of you considering coming to Linear. And you guys are looking for people in the European time zone. What's important to you when hiring, other than seniority and some of the more job description things? How do you find those people that you trust to give that agency and make Linear great?
We unfortunately don't find them. Well, yeah, sure. We are hiring, but it's always been hard, like really hard. We hired recruiters back in the day. Like I think we were 15 people altogether, and 4 of those were recruiters. which is sort of a crazy ratio to have. But we sort of did realize that like after we had gone through all of the friends and everybody we had worked with, we just had to sort of spend time to go through LinkedIn and find these people that would be able to build Linear with us. And it's mostly still that like that today. I think probably like 90% of all of our hires come from recruiters sort of scouring the internet and then reaching out, and then we go through interviewing processes. But 10% still sort of apply and then sort of are the right match. What we look for is what we've always looked for, which is taste. Like, help us build a quality product. Like, if you want to build beautiful software, that's a great start. And if you're somewhat interested in the project management space, be it only for you wanting to build something for yourself because Linear is lacking in some ways, or you don't get it from your current solution, then that's another great start. Like, we want people who sort of like the same things that we do in software, like that can help us maintain the high quality bar and move it forward.
Once again, if you look at some of the hires that you've made and people who've joined the team and been successful, are there particular experiences or traits that unite those people other than taste, which is kind of the threshold for entry?
Yeah, I think like the one thing that almost always holds true is that these folks have seen both sides of the table. They've been at a small startup. They know what it means to sort of ship fast and test early and talk with their customers. And then they've seen sort of bigger companies as well in order to get insight in from sort of good engineering practices and be able to build a product that scales, for example, and is performant. Those are the two big things, and everything else really is hard to say. Obviously, you need to be a great engineer, and more than that, like maybe you need to be a product engineer. So we most of the engineering hires outside of infrastructure, we hire product engineers, people who have built products before, who are keen on building products and want to sort of spend their time in that space.
And right at the start of this talk, you mentioned that if you were to go back to Finland and think about starting your career again, maybe in this context versus that context, then you would focus on just like building things. Is that the advice you'd have to maybe some of our younger, newer audience members today?
No.
Okay.
I mean, yes, like if that's what you want, like if you are keen on building product, and if you feel like you're somebody who creates something new, don't go to an agency. Like, agency work is easy and is well paid. I guess I don't know about the UK market, but at least in Finland, like that's what people do. And the thing that annoys me is that, like, I've got so many friends in Finland that sort of still are at agencies, and I don't even try to tell them. I've gotten a few out, and the ones that I've gotten out are like super happy. They're like, why didn't I do this earlier? Like, why did I spend all my time, building things for other people when I can build it for myself? The thing that you need to have is, like, you need to have the mindset of that, everything is possible. And that's maybe, at least in Finland, that's what's lacking with people, probably in the UK less so. But in Finland, people are pessimistic, to begin with. And they think that it'll fail anyways. Like, even if I try, even if I have a great idea and I execute well, I'm not gonna make it because, like, I'm just one person coming out of Finland. Like, I haven't seen anybody else make it. So why would I even try? Let's just go to an agency and build stuff for others, for companies that have already made it. And that's sort of sad in my mind. If you have the inkling of building something and sort of being creative and wanting to build something, then yes, then my advice would be don't go to agencies, but try to find a way to get into a company that does something that you're keen on doing. Do that with a US-based company if possible. Like, I think that's the biggest accelerator that you can have in your career. Work for a US company because they have this down. Like, they don't believe in failure. Or they do believe in failure, but they they have this positive mindset of like, if we can just build it and if we execute right, we will conquer the world, and that is infectious.
Are there any companies that you admire, kind of similar stage to you in terms of having a similar perspective on building things? The world is your oyster and taste.
Yeah. Like one that comes to mind from maybe a few years ago was like from the early days was Superhuman. Like Superhuman, I don't know if you remember, was and it still is sort of an email client, and now it got sold to
Grammarly?
Yeah, of all
I
companies.
think it's all called Superhuman now. Is that true? That they like rebranded the company?
Yeah.
Sort of, okay.
That was the inspiration for us. Like they sort of they were executing they were executing before us, and their command menu was sort of the inspiration that gave us the idea of like, oh, we could build a desktop-like application as well. And the first thing actually that we built into the application that was user-facing was the command menu. We didn't have any issue lists in there. We just like toyed around with the command menu that would animate in and out. So yeah, Superhuman was a great company back in the day, and probably still is. I haven't used them personally because I don't really use email. And there's tons of others. Nothing. I'm drawing a blank here.
That's fine. Well, thank you so much for coming and
Thank you.
spending time with us.
Good. Thanks so much.